It was one of those warm Saturday mornings when the air smelled faintly of fresh, cut grass and coffee drifting from my open kitchen window. My daughter, Lily, had just returned home from college for the weekend. She was bubbling with excitement, telling me about her new internship and the friends she'd made. We decided to visit our old neighborhood park, just a few blocks down from where the homeowners association always seemed to have something to complain about. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from, because what happened next will leave you speechless. I had no idea that day would turn into something straight out of a nightmare. Lily wanted to stop by our old house to see Mrs. Grant, our elderly neighbor who used to bake her cookies as a kid. The HOA had gotten stricter over the years, and Karen, our self-proclaimed community watch queen, had somehow become its acting enforcer. Everyone knew she thrived on control. Her blonde bob never moved, her clipboard was practically glued to her arm, and she always had that smug, tight-lipped smile that made you feel like you were breaking some unspoken rule just by existing. When Lily and I parked by the curb, I noticed Karen standing across the street, watering her roses in her usual perfect garden, pretending not to stare. Lily waved politely, and I gave a short nod. Karen didn't wave back. Instead, she narrowed her eyes, lips pressed so tight they almost disappeared. I brushed it off. I'd seen that look before, but something about the way she held her phone made my stomach twist. We walked up the path to Mrs. Grant's porch, and Lily knocked gently. I could hear the old wooden wind chime tapping softly in the breeze. Mrs. Grant opened the door with a delighted gasp, hugging Lily tightly. They laughed and talked, just like old times. I stood nearby, soaking in the simple joy of it all, but across the street Karen was pacing. Her voice carried faintly over the trimmed hedges. She was on the phone, glancing our way every few seconds. My chest tightened. "Mom," Lily whispered, "is she seriously calling someone about us?" I tried to stay calm. "Probably just another HOA complaint," I said, though I didn't believe it. My eyes followed her as she spoke animatedly, her hands slicing through the air. Then she pointed straight at us. The air seemed to thicken. That's when I saw the flashing lights turning into the street corner. A police cruiser. My pulse quickened. Within minutes, 2 officers stepped out, hands resting near their holsters. Karen practically sprinted toward them, waving her arms dramatically like she'd just witnessed a crime. "That girl," she shrieked, pointing at Lily. "She's trespassing. She doesn't live here." The officers exchanged confused glances, but Karen kept talking, fast, loud, and full of false authority. Lily's face went pale. "Mom, what's going on?" she whispered. I could see the fear in her eyes, the confusion. I took her hand and stepped forward, my heart pounding in my ears. Karen's voice carried over the tension. "This neighborhood is private property. She doesn't belong here." The absurdity of it all hit me like a slap. I had owned that very house for 15 years before moving just 3 streets away. The officers approached us, their expressions cautious. "Ma'am, we received a report of trespassing. Can we see some ID?" one of them asked, his tone polite but firm. I felt my jaw tighten. "Officer," I said evenly, "this is my daughter. She grew up here. We're visiting an old friend." Karen interjected sharply, "They're lying. I've never seen that girl before. I manage HOA security." She was trembling with self-righteous energy, clutching her phone like a weapon. For a moment, no one spoke. The breeze carried the faint hum of cicadas, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Lily reached for her bag, pulling out her student ID, her hands shaking. I could see the officers softening slightly, but Karen wasn't done. She whipped out a folder of HOA violations and waved it like a badge. "People think they can come and go here without permission. Not on my watch," she barked. That's when I felt something inside me shift. Years of patience, diplomacy, and silence suddenly cracked open. The absurdity, the arrogance, it burned. I took one slow step forward and met Karen's eyes, steady and cold. "You really don't know who you're talking to, do you?" I said quietly. Her smirk faltered just for a second, and in that heartbeat of hesitation, I knew. She had no idea what was coming next. The taller officer cleared his throat, glancing between Karen and me. "Ma'am, can we just confirm your connection to the property?" His tone was diplomatic, but I could hear the uncertainty beneath it. Karen folded her arms and sneered. "Oh, please, officer. She's just pretending. I've been on the HOA board for 6 years. I know everyone who lives here." Her words dripped with superiority. The officer turned back to me, waiting for an answer. I reached into my purse, pulled out my driver's license, and handed it over calmly. He looked down, his brows knitting together. "This says you used to live at this address," he murmured. I nodded. "Correct. My husband and I sold it, but Mrs. Grant, our old neighbor, still lives here. We came to visit her." Lily stood beside me, clutching her ID, eyes wide and tearful. I could feel the tension radiating from her. How humiliating it must have been, being accused in front of neighbors she grew up with. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, what a coincidence," she scoffed. "Surely everyone who trespasses has a story." She turned to the officers. "You can't just let them go because they say they used to live here. The HOA has rules." Her voice rose higher, drawing the attention of several curious neighbors peeking through curtains and standing on porches. The quiet street began to buzz with whispers. The younger officer sighed. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "we'll handle this. Please step back." But Karen wasn't used to being dismissed. "Excuse me, I'm in charge of enforcing neighborhood safety," she snapped, planting herself between us and the officers. Her perfume was suffocating, a sharp floral cloud that made my nose sting. Lily shifted uncomfortably. I leaned slightly toward the officer and said, my tone low and firm, "Officer, this is harassment. My daughter hasn't broken a single law." He nodded slowly, but before he could respond, Karen barked again. "Harassment? You're lucky I didn't press charges for trespassing." That word, charges, hung heavy in the air. I took a slow breath, controlling the rising anger in my chest. Mrs. Grant appeared on her porch, her cane tapping against the wooden steps. "What's going on here?" she called out, her voice thin but steady. The officers turned toward her. Karen jumped in before anyone could answer. "Mrs. Grant, go back inside. These people don't belong here." That was the final straw for me. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The crowd stilled. Even Karen froze mid-breath. I stepped forward, my heels crunching on the gravel. "You're accusing a young woman of trespassing for visiting someone she's known her whole life," I said. "You've overstepped again." Karen crossed her arms, smirking. "Oh, and what are you going to do about it?" she taunted. My lips curved into a calm, deliberate smile. "You'll find out soon enough." The taller officer finally spoke again. "Ma'am, I think we can resolve this. There's no evidence of trespassing. Everyone here seems to know each other." But Karen wasn't done playing hero. She spun toward her phone, snapping photos of Lily, muttering about documentation for the HOA report. Lily recoiled, tears welling up in her eyes. My hands clenched involuntarily. "Delete those," I said sharply. Karen smirked. "I have every right to record suspicious activity." The younger officer frowned. "Ma'am, that's not necessary." But Karen ignored him, angling her phone closer. That's when I took out my wallet again, but not for ID this time. I flipped open a small black leather case, polished and unmistakable. Inside gleamed my judicial badge. The shift was immediate. The officers froze. Karen's grin faltered. The murmurs from the watching neighbors turned into stunned silence. I met Karen's eyes squarely. "I'm Judge Evelyn Carter," I said, my voice level but razor sharp, "and you just called the police on a sitting judge and her daughter for walking down a public sidewalk." The words hit her like thunder. Karen blinked rapidly, her face draining of color. "Why, you're joking," she stammered. I didn't flinch. "Do I look like I'm joking?" The officers stepped back slightly, posture stiffening in newfound respect. The taller one cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we had no idea," he said quickly. I nodded. "I understand, officer. You were doing your job. But this woman," I gestured at Karen, "has been abusing her position to intimidate residents for years." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, no words coming out. For the first time, she looked small. Her phone hung loosely at her side. The crowd had grown, neighbors whispering, filming, watching her unravel. Mrs. Grant, bless her, hobbled down her steps and said in a loud, quavering voice, "That's what you get for picking fights, Karen." A ripple of laughter broke through the tension. I didn't smile. I wasn't done. My tone was quiet but firm. I'll be filing a formal report with the HOA and local authorities about today's harassment. If I hear of another false call like this, there will be legal consequences." Karen's jaw dropped. Legal consequences," she whispered, as though the words themselves hurt. I met her gaze one last time, and she knew I meant every syllable. Karen's face went red as whispers rippled through the watching crowd. She tried to recover her composure, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "You can't talk to me like that," she sputtered, her voice cracking. "I'm part of the HOA board." I raised a hand calmly, "and I'm part of the judiciary of this state." I interrupted. The contrast in our tones, hers desperate, mine steady, hung thick in the air. The officers exchanged knowing glances. They'd seen enough. Lily's hand trembled in mine, but I could feel her starting to relax, realizing the balance of power had shifted. One of the officers cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we'll go ahead and log this as a misunderstanding," he said diplomatically. I nodded. "Thank you, officer. Please make sure that the record reflects the false report." My eyes flicked toward Karen, who looked ready to collapse under the weight of the stares surrounding her. A teenage boy from down the street shouted, "Karen's in trouble now." Laughter broke out again, and Karen shot daggers at him, muttering something about disrespect. Her voice was drowned out by the murmuring neighbors, all of whom suddenly seemed less afraid of her than they had an hour ago. Mrs. Grant gave me a subtle thumbs up, and I almost smiled, almost. I turned back to Karen, stepping closer until she could see her own reflection in the polished edge of my badge. "Let me explain something," I said softly, but everyone could hear me. "The law protects property, but it also protects people. You don't get to weaponize authority to humiliate someone you don't recognize." Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. The fight was gone from her eyes. For the first time, I saw fear, not of punishment, but of accountability. The officers walked back toward their car, one of them radioing in a report. As the flashing lights faded, the street began to return to its usual quiet hum. Karen turned as if to leave, but I wasn't finished. "Oh, and Karen," I called. She froze mid-step. "You might want to expect a visit from the HOA Compliance Board. I've already spoken with the county attorney about your little pattern of false claims." Her shoulders tensed, and without another word, she hurried inside, slamming her perfect white door behind her. Lily exhaled shakily beside me, her voice soft. "Mom, that was incredible." I squeezed her hand gently. "No, sweetheart, that was necessary." We stood there a moment longer, the late afternoon sun warming our backs, the air finally calm again. Across the street, a few neighbors nodded in quiet approval. For years, Karen had made their lives miserable, and today, she'd finally been confronted. Later that evening, I received an email from the HOA regional office. They were deeply concerned about the incident and requested an official statement. I sent them everything: bodycam report, timestamps, even a few videos neighbors had shared. Within days, Karen was suspended from her post pending review. The irony was almost poetic. The woman who lived to police others had been undone by her own obsession with control. A week later, I saw Mrs. Grant again. She smiled warmly and said, "I haven't seen the neighborhood this peaceful in years." I nodded, breathing in the scent of her gardenias. "Sometimes," I said, "people need to be reminded that rules aren't weapons. They are responsibilities." Lily hugged me from behind, laughing. "You sounded like you were in court again," she teased. I smiled faintly. Old habits die hard. That night, as I sat on the porch, sipping tea and listening to crickets, I couldn't help but reflect on the day. So many people hide behind authority, mistaking control for respect. But true authority isn't loud, it's steady, it's just. Karen learned that the hard way, and maybe, just maybe, the neighborhood did too. If you believe in standing up for what's right, no matter who's watching, hit like, share this story, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if it were your daughter? Because sometimes, justice doesn't wear a robe, it wears resolve.